Above earth's lamentation, I hear the clear, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is all in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is all in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
Thank you, Theo. Good evening, friends, and welcome to Complicated Hope, an evening with Margaret Wheatley, hosted by the BTS Center. We gather to discuss in community, a topic that comes up often in our programming and our research: hope. And tonight we aim to complicate it so that we might better embody it. My name is Nicole Dieroff, pronouns she and her. I'm an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ and proud to serve as program director at the BTS Center. I'm logging in this evening from my home in Scarborough, Maine, on lands long stewarded by the Wabanaki, the people of the dawn, a place that they call Owaskawag, or the land of many grasses, because of the wetland ecosystem that defines this place. I am joined this evening by the BTS Center staff team, program consultants, research advisors, and several members of our board of trustees. If you're one of those people, please feel free to wave or share greetings in the chat. We're so glad you're with us. The BTS Center is the organizational successor to Bangor Theological Seminary. Our mission is to catalyze spiritual imagination with enduring wisdom for transformative faith leadership. We are focused on spiritual leadership for a climate-changed world and offer a number of programs of spiritual and vocational formation, including this fall, a book study on Who Do We Choose to Be by Margaret Wheatley. If you are part of that book study, please feel free to wave or share greetings in the chat. We are so, so glad all of you are here and participating in that program with us. I now invite you to put on your digital name tag, renaming as needed and indicating how you would like to be known in this space. I also invite you to open up the chat so we might know a little more about each of you gathered with us for this conversation. So first, I invite you to share, where are you logging in from this evening or afternoon if you're in a time zone west of me? I'm seeing a number of different places in Maine, Massachusetts, Ohio, Michigan, Oregon. Welcome to friends from Canada, Washington State, Pennsylvania. Welcome to each and every one of you. Howdy right back to our friend Scott in North Carolina. Second, I invite you to share what is one way in which your location, your place in the world, is experiencing change right now. What is one way in which your place is experiencing change right now? I'm seeing 70 degrees in October. Yes, we're about to hit that in Maine also. Fewer birds, fewer frogs, record rainfall, flooding, ocean temperatures rising. Lots of comments on weather and the environment, but also comments in here about smaller church attendance, out of town development money. Interesting. Welcoming new Mainers. Many asylum seekers are finding their way here right now. Fear because of war in the Middle East. Thank you for naming that. Thank you for all your sharing. Changes in executive leadership. Okay, last but not least, I am wondering, what is your working definition of hope? Go ahead and add that to the chat. What is your working definition of hope? And I'm not looking for an essay, you know, like a sentence or a phrase would be ideal for chat sharing. Nice. I'm seeing to find something I can do, meaningful collective action, action for the future, belief in things I cannot yet see, imagined possibilities. Hope as things can always be different than they are. Cycles. Someone sharing hope as a verb as compared to perhaps a noun, which may be the way that we relate to it sometimes. Thank you for these sharings. I invite you to scroll through and read yourself. And I just want to share, I'm seeing so many names I recognize in the chat right now. I'm so glad to be here with all of you on this evening. Thank you for choosing to be in this Zoom online space with this group of gathered people on the topic that we have chosen for tonight. In a moment, I'll be turning things over to the BTS Center's Director of Applied Research, Ben Yashua Davis, who will be engaging in conversation with Margaret Wheatley. We'll then get to hear from 3 respondents and come back to a conversation with all of those voices together. In between, we'll be engaging our breath and our voices with song leader Hugh Elliott. At this point, we're going to turn the chat off so that we can all bring our best listening selves to this conversation that we get to witness. There will be moments as we kind of pause in conversation when we'll invite you to open the chat and contribute appreciations and wonderings, share resources as you might want to name them. I'll be sure to cue you in those moments that you should be engaging in that way. Thank you again, friends, for being here. Ben.
Greetings, everyone, and it is so good to have you here this evening. My name is Ben Joshua Davis, and I'm Director of Applied Research here at the BTS Center, and it is my pleasure to introduce Margaret Wheatley to all of you. Margaret Wheatley began caring about the world's peoples in 1966 as a Peace Corps volunteer in post-war Korea. As a consultant, senior level advisor, teacher, speaker, and formal leader, she has worked on all continents except Antarctica with all levels, ages, and types of organizations, leaders, and activists. Margaret has written 10 books, including the classic Leadership in the New Science, and been honored for her pathfinding work by many professional associations, universities, and organizations. I actually remember borrowing Leadership in the New Science from my parents' library when I was 20 years old and in college. This was the copy. Apparently, I never returned it. Sorry, Mom and Dad. And I was absolutely mesmerized by the idea that the patterns present in the natural world could shape the patterns we form in organizational life. I interviewed Margaret for the BTS Center podcast Climate Change in an interview that'll be out in a few months, and it was one of the richest hours in conversation I've spent all year. As we talked, I learned much more about her than the biography on the back of her books can cover, about her capacity for change and growth, her clarity about the moment we're in and what we must do as leaders to respond, and her graciousness and profound generosity of heart. Meg, it is such a pleasure to share this space with you again, this time with a few more of our friends.
Yes, we have a lot of people listening. I'm very grateful for all of you for coming. And it's great to be in conversation with you again, Ben. We had such a good time last time.
Such a good time. And that is a fantastic teaser for that episode when it comes out at the beginning of next year. Where I wanted to begin is by talking about leadership. This is something that I've thought a lot about and the models that I inherited, where one of the base assumptions is that it will, quote, all turn out all right in the end. And we are now in a place where that axiom around which much of our practice, certainly around much of my practice, had been built, seems either highly in doubt or utterly impossible. Now, I know you don't have faith that it will, quote, all turn out all right in the end, meaning that the Western civilizational project can continue indefinitely, especially not in the face of the overwhelming societal and planetary forces that are at play. And I also know that alongside this, you clearly share like a deep belief in the power of the human spirit and our capacity to be creative and compassionate and steadfast. Incidentally, this often seems to be quite the reverse of the stories in our dominant culture, where we are taught to have absolute faith in the power of progress and learn cynicism in the capacities of human goodness. So I guess my question for you is, in a moment where you no longer have faith that everything will just turn out all right, what do you place your faith in? And how do you suggest leaders center themselves in a moment where the ultimate outcome no longer feels like a given?
Well, first of all, I was never taught that maxim. I was raised by a Jewish grandmother, and I think that's some explanation for it. But it's interesting to know, I would like everyone to know, what is your basic feeling about progress, that things do work out over time? I mean, a number of my colleagues now feeling immense failure, failed projects, failed initiatives, loss of funding, nasty behaviors toward them, and that nasty is not quite the right word, terrible behaviors, criticizing them on social media. A lot of those dear colleagues of mine still just push progress off into the future. So maybe it won't happen in my lifetime, but I'm planting seeds for the next generation, my grandchildren. And that actually, that perspective now is disappearing also as the times confront us. My first message to all of us who believed in progress and now feel that we failed is it's not our fault. There were conditions far beyond our capacity to affect them. All the work so many of us have done. I liked that definition. I loved Joanna Macy's definition of active hope, or hope, as Greta Thunberg said, hope is in our actions. So it's not really hoping for something, it's what we do anyway. Václav Havel, whom one of you quoted with his, I agree with that version of hope, that it's something beyond the horizon, but that doesn't mean we make it there. It means we always have a sense, as one of you also wrote, of moving forward, of doing our best, of trying our best and working with circumstances. And the reason I say so categorically, it's not our fault. We did our best. We exhausted ourselves in trying to create positive change, to create a more just and equitable culture, society, or organization. We did our very best and we were very good at it. But events far beyond our control, events of corporate greed and the rise of militarism, which is now shockingly in our face, and the rise of climate-induced migrations, droughts, and wars, these are things we have no control over. So my work with leaders now is, who do you choose to be? Given that you created so much efforting that was good. I mean, I did it too. All the people around me did it as well. But we have to be realistic now. And this is where I don't want us to have faith in progress, because that's a mirage. And it was only in Western society, by the way, because in most cultures, life is known in reality, which it is, cyclical, right? You go through stages. And we decided, no, we can do it our own way, and we don't have to, we will never go backwards, you know, we'll always progress. Well, that's just nonsense. Life is cyclical. But what I want with leaders now is not faith in progress. I insist on faith in the human spirit. And for me, that's the bedrock. And once you have that faith, and it's tested over and over because there's so much atrocious, violent, aggressive behavior or withdrawal from people who just can't bear what's going on. I want leaders to know how to invoke, uncover, rediscover what people are capable of.
I was noting as you were sharing what I was feeling kind of in my heart and in my body, and noticing this pattern of deep grief. This idea that, like, we really can't save the world. It's not gonna happen. And also deep relief. And I think back to some of the times as a leader, I would work my tail to the bone and give the best I could, and the outcomes would still not be what they were. And the feeling I would still have is that somehow it was all my fault. And I'm sure I'm not the only person in this digital room.
People around you probably told you it was your fault, or your bosses, superiors tell you it's your fault.
Right. So I almost feel like the place we have to start is in that process of grief, of kind of, I don't know, composting our dreams, composting our narrative about the ways our jobs were supposed to be. And I wanted to ask first what practices you might suggest for those of us who are encountering that kind of hard moment and need to find ways to process what's in front of us.
Against that, Ben, we don't have time to process our grief. We have to acknowledge it. It's a luxury to think that we can sit back and notice, compost our grief, our trauma. No, the world needs a so much from us right now. And this for me is how we activate real privilege. We're here in safety. We have electronics, we have water, we have food, we have everything we need to offer ourselves. And that's a deliberate word, to offer ourselves to our communities, to our family, to some greater circle of influence we have. I have no more patience for how much attention we are giving to ourselves, our grief, our trauma. It's gone crazy, and it's just more narcissism, actually. It's more focused reification of the self. So when you listen to me, it's just like, get over it and get busy. The world needs us, and we are well enough. We are well enough to take action now. Or I teach all the time, look around you and ask the question, what's needed here? And then the second question, am I the one to offer something to this need? Not what I want, not what will fulfill some purpose that I created in a calmer time, not some passion, but just look around and ask, what's needed here? That question will be exhausting because there's so much needed. But then the second question is essential. Am I the one? At this time in my life, do I have enough stability? Do I have enough mental stability? Do I have certain skills that could be useful here? And do I have a practice of stabilizing my mind so I don't get so triggered, so I deal with my anger and rage and sorrow and grief? You know, we just have to expect to feel grief-stricken over the world. If you don't feel grief-stricken, then you're not paying attention. So awake people must be awake. I'm quoting now from a great poem. Yeah, so that's my response. No more composting. Let's just get to work with people. Let's get to work.
That's beautiful. And that's a really helpful challenge to those of us who are living in conditions of privilege in urgent times.
Privilege is a responsibility. I don't feel guilty for it. I hold myself accountable. How am I using my privilege? How do I want to be used by sacred world, divine sources? You know, that's a great privilege to be able to ask that question, be able to pray for an answer. These are great privileges, but they also come with huge responsibilities. You know, because when you get an answer, if you ask how, please use me, Lord, or please use me, world, and then you get an answer, it's like, oh, well, that's not quite the answer I wanted. Yeah. And that's
Right.
where we hold ourselves accountable.
So I'm curious if you could share with us a little bit more about this understanding of what does it mean to engage in meaningful work. You talk about like what's noticing, what's in front of us, and then asking, am I the one who is being called to offer this? And I think this too is connected with questions of agency. So like if we're not supposed to go and, you know, save the world, then what are we supposed to do and what can we do? And I wondered if for leaders who are feeling a little overwhelmed at even that question and where to start, what might you suggest as beginning practices? And I'm wondering if there's a story you could share either from your own life or from the life of someone who you're working with who's embodied this well.
Well, my work now is to train spiritual warriors for the human spirit. And these people, many hundreds of them by now, are leaders, activists, concerned citizens of all ages, but with a predominance, and I want to salute us older women, of a predominance of older women who still want to make a contribution. So we start, and I'm going to speak generally, it's not just one person who embodies this. I now watch several hundred people who've gone through training with me embody it. You have to start with motivation to serve, not to suffer alone, and not to be in it for yourself. You have to want to serve this time. This is an historic role in all times when the civilization is in its last stages, when it's decadent, when it worships celebrities and sports heroes and musicians. That's a pattern you can find in every civilization. So that was true of 8th century Baghdad. That was true of Incan ways in probably the 1500s. Every civilization in its last stage plays out the same pattern. And there are always then only a few people, only a few, it's all of us on this call, who understand that in order to preserve community, in order to preserve the best of the human spirit, which is only available when we're together, that we are the ones who engage in self-sacrifice. And we notice that it's only through our self-sacrifice can community be preserved. It's incredibly hard work, but I'm quoting now from Sir John Glove, who, if you're reading Who Do We Choose to Be, you're becoming familiar with his wonderful historical accounts. And he said, we're the ones who raise the banner of duty and honor against the depravity and despair of our time. But it always happens. There are always a few people who come forward. So we have to take on this role of wanting to serve and knowing that to do that well, we have to develop a stable mind. We have to, which you can only do through meditation, where you're watching your mind. You're not trying to get peaceful, you're watching your mind. So you learn to catch yourself more quickly when someone makes you angry. You learn to catch yourself when you're feeling fine and all of a sudden you're really down and out and depressed. You learn to know yourself. And then we form very strong community. And we also have to learn, all of us, to see past the filters of hope. And to want to truly see clearly so we can act wisely. That's one of my phrases these days. We need to see clearly so we can act wisely. How do we see clearly? Well, this is where the work on judgments and biases at an individual level is essential. It's not working well at a collective level at all, and there are good reasons for that. But we need to take responsibility for wanting to see reality, and then seeing more clearly, we can actually decide how to be of value. So definitely the core motivation has to be the question of how can I serve? Not how can I get what I thought I needed in order to lead a good life, but how can I serve people? And this is not hard, really. I mean, we all have families, we're all in communities, we're all in congregations, perhaps, to just be curious about what people could use from you. And then it gets simpler and simpler. And by the way, this is not only meaningful work, this is joyful work, which is a great surprise to many of us, that when we are truly together, this is Richard Rohr's great teaching, that joy, he hasn't said it quite this way, but he said joy is available when we are truly beyond the self in communion. And so I have found in my own work that joy is a consequence of being together in beyond the self, beyond what I thought I needed, just being available to serve others, and then having good boundaries also, because us women actually do know what it's like to lead, to offer ourselves over and over without any boundaries, but it's about service.
I'm wondering, I love that idea that like the joy is a consequence of the work and being together. And I think one of the most powerful concept I've received from you is the idea of islands of sanity, these places where the best aspects of the human spirit can flourish. And I wonder, in our last couple minutes in this part of our conversation together, if you might describe a little bit of what those look like and how you know if you're actually creating one or not.
Yeah, well, I have a new book that will be out in March called Restoring Sanity, Practices to Awaken Generosity, Creativity, and Kindness in Ourselves and Our Organizations, all about creating the islands of sanity. I have to say, this is a grand experiment. I don't know what's possible any longer. We get these sudden shifts where the whole world trembles as it is trembling right now with what's ahead in terms of violence in several different arenas, not just the Middle East. But wherever we can, this is President Teddy Roosevelt's great advice: do what you can, where you are, with what you have, to which I've added with the people in front of you. And I think the work, I use the phrase islands of sanity, that is a concept someone told me about. I'm so grateful that in nature creates places of refuge. They're called refugia in Latin. And they're places of refuge where life is still maintained. In the midst of a volcano, there'll be a little pocket of green life. Or in the midst of floods, there'll be some place where life, small places, life is continuing. So this is nature's way, and I think it's highly human and very interesting and enticing. Can we create places that are both sanctuaries and also places of possibility? That takes building community. That takes a commitment to stay with those I've decided to be and work together. It's not just casual networking. And for me, islands of sanity are refugia, places of possibility and places of sanctuary. I don't know how much longer we'll have that privilege. We may have to go underground, as the early Christians did in the catacombs, and as other great spiritual traditions, those who had the strong faith removed themselves in order to maintain the faith, but also to do good work. So this is a bold experiment for me right now. Nothing, but I know it's not easy.
Thank you, Meg, for those words. And I'm going to invite us to just take a moment after this first conversation to take a breath and to receive what we have heard. And Nicole, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Meg. If you are sitting with an appreciation for something you just heard, or a wondering that you would want to share with our online community this evening, I invite you to put those into the chat now, and we've turned that ability back on. Let's do that as we sing together. To you.
Hi, all. This is a song called Here I Am. You're going to see the lyrics in a minute. I wrote it for tonight, and I was both responding to Meg's words and, of course, to so many images and footage of Gazan parents pulling children from rubble and thinking for me, the most toxic aspect of celebrity culture is that it makes us think our voice doesn't matter, that somebody else can speak. And we even do that to God. So I think I'm gonna sing through this song twice, and I invite you to sing along with me. The way the words go, you could hear it as like a psalm or like as a God voice saying, I'm here, and you can hear it as a song of comfort. But I also really encourage you to sing it as an expression of your own presence, your own willingness to be committed to a burning world in chaos in this moment. Here I am, in the thunder and the chaos. Here I am, here I am, here I am, wading through the burning water. Here I am. Here I am, underneath a sky that's falling. Here I am, here I am, here I am, reaching for you through the rubble. Here I am, and I'm not going, while I hear you breathing underneath a stone. Here I am, here I am, and you are not alone. In the thunder and the chaos, here I am, here I am, here I am, wading through the burning water. Here I am, here I am, here I am, underneath the sky that's falling. Here I am, here I am, here I am, reaching for you through the rubble. Here I am, and I'm not going, while I hear you breathing underneath a stone. Here I am, here I am, and you are not alone.
Thank you, Thew. That song was quite moving for me. Thank you so much for your composition and willingness to share it with us tonight. I'd now like to invite our respondents to share after listening to Ben and Margaret's conversation. First, Dr. Suzanne Mosier. She is an independent scholar and consultant who works with government agencies, nonprofits, foundations, and other researchers on adaptation to climate change, science policy interactions, effective climate change communication, and the psychosocial resilience in the face of the traumatic and transformative challenges associated with climate change. We first got to know Susie through her insightful essay in All We Can Save, and most recently partnered with her Adaptive Mind project on a series of retreats and trainings for our BTS Center leadership team. She is a key informant in our understanding of the context we are in and the capacities needed to lead in these times. Thank you, Susie, for the questions you are helping us ask in this moment. And thank you for joining us tonight in the midst of what we hope is a super meaningful sabbatical.
Thank you, Nicole. And thank you for having me, inviting me into this conversation. It's just such a privilege to be participating in it, and to finally meet Meg Wheatley, whose books I have read for years, and probably this most recent one, is probably the more impactful on my work and life than all the other ones together. So thank you so much, Meg, for that, and for your opening comments, which God, there are so many things I want to have like a cup of tea with you over, and maybe it needs to go into a long glass of wine or something, because there's so much in what you just said. And let me contextualize. You just started that, Nicole, with mentioning my sabbatical. I am right now in a very privileged position to take a little bit of time off from my work, which, I guess you could call maybe narcissistic. And I will say it is profoundly necessary that we create these little refugia, and maybe not just for ourselves, but help others have them, so that we can keep going in the work of serving others. And part of my sabbatical journey is that I'm traveling for a month through the United States. And just to contextualize, I yesterday spent the day in the Grand Canyon, looking through half the Earth's age at all these times of permanence and times of disruption, right? And right now I'm sitting literally in the Canyon of the Ancients in southwestern Colorado. I'll be in Chaco Canyon tomorrow. So literally looking at civilizational failures. So what a better context than to be having this conversation. It certainly confirms that, we're not special. Many societies have come and gone before, and will again. So that's it's a good place from which to be reminded of the necessity of how to serve in this time. So thank you for setting that stage. And I guess there are two things, Meg, that you said that I want to speak to, that relate what you just mentioned to my work and my own understanding and hopes for what I can contribute. And they were your very, I'll just call it black and white sentences of, we don't have control over the big things that are happening. And the second one was, we don't have time to process our grief. So the first one, we don't have any control over these large scale processes, is something that, I have come just, oh God, how do I say that? Kicking and screaming to come to accept these global processes and all the system dynamics of how much weight and power is behind them, and the momentum behind them. And what's simultaneously true is that we can build all the refugia in the world. If we do not contain the scope of the change that is happening, they will simply wipe all those out, right? So we can go all the way to nuclear war, and it doesn't matter whether you were kind to anyone. We can go to 5 degrees Celsius of warming, and it doesn't matter what species you might have protected in that refugia, right? So it actually does matter, and it's dangerous to tell people it doesn't matter. So I really want to emphasize that for all of you who work on what I call the front end of the problem, the causes of climate change or biodiversity loss, or whatever your focus is, it does make a difference how much we try to contain that, so that we enable us to bring seeds forward into the next iteration of human existence, if it is to happen on this planet. So that's a really important one. Most of my work is actually focused on the back end of the problem. As you just mentioned, I work more on adaptation rather than mitigation. which means preparing for the consequences and managing them, trying to reduce and contain the suffering as much as we can as we go. And I work with governments, I work with NGOs, anybody who is a practitioner in this field who basically tries to create the world of tomorrow by integrating and looking at climate change at the same time. And what I've learned over the many years, 30 years that I'm working in this field, is that they're technical professionals, they're doers, they're the engineers, they're the people who make stuff happen, and their credibility is on the line if they admit to having a feeling or two about that. And they feel like they can't talk about it with their colleagues, with their bosses, with their clients, with their spouses at home, with their children, because my God, what, all that they know about the future for those children is horrible. So they have no place to go. And what we've learned is that 80% of them are burning out. When you're burning out, you have nothing more to give. You said something about this is the time to serve and to self-sacrifice. They are doing that at their expense, and it is endangering everybody who does no longer get to benefit from their expertise. So we have to somehow, I think, balance creating refugia for even the emotional expression, whatever it is that people have, without necessarily letting people fall all the way down into the narcissistic end of that. It's so, in other words, it's not as extreme. It's not a black and white. I think we have to find ways to rematriate, bring back our emotional side into even our technical professions, even into the work that we do, whatever it is, so that we can show up as the full humans that we are, that we just simply feel like we can't. So anyway, so that's, maybe just a couple of comments. And maybe one question I want to leave you with is, in this amazing shift that you describe of no longer focusing on the global, but becoming local leaders, there is a tremendous loss or an acceptance of the loss in that. And I'm wondering if, in the spirit of in which Ben talked to you, whether you can say something about your practices for being with, or the acceptance of that loss and the suffering, particularly in light of the fact that maybe grief is not where you feel like we should be going. So what then is a right way to be with accepting the tremendous suffering that is happening, in particular for people who are far less privileged? So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's clear why we brought you into this conversation. And I can see Meg is busy taking notes because we actually have two more people to share responses. And then I know she'll get back to some of what you've raised. Thank you so much, Susie. So next, I'd like to welcome thoughts and a question from my colleague, Reverend Dr. Alan Ewing Merrill, our BTS Center Executive Director. Alan has offered leadership to both congregations and nonprofits, including Hope Gateway in Portland and Moral Movement Maine. He completed his Doctor of Ministry degree while serving the BTS Center, and his thesis was entitled Vocation, Formation, Imagination, and Transformation, Spiritual Leadership for a Climate-Changed World. He's woven into everything we're about at the BTS Center, from budgets to workiversaries to BTS Center branded socks. And how we think about hope is something he talks about a lot. Alan.
Thank you, Nicole. And I want to start with a word of thanks to you, Margaret. Like Ben and others, I have followed your work for many years and really counted on you as someone whose wisdom I could trust, even when it challenged my own understanding or made me uncomfortable, pulled me into my discomfort zone. And I'm sure there are many in this Zoom room tonight who are here because they, in a similar way, have found inspiration and challenge and wisdom in your words. So sincerely, thank you for saying yes to this invitation. It's It's really an honor to be here with you this evening and with all of you in this room. Thanks for joining us. And Susie, thanks for sharing your perspective. I want to move us in a little different direction, because as I was hearing you speak, Margaret, I was thinking about what all of this might mean for faith communities and spiritual leaders. As Nicole mentioned before, stepping into this role with the BTS Center, I served churches as a pastor for about 20 years. And that meant that part of my responsibility was to preach. Not the only thing I did, but it was one thing I did on a regular basis. And I'm sure we have some preachers in the room tonight, I'm sure of it. And yes, in most American churches today, there is a lot of privilege. Thank you for naming that. And as you say, Margaret, privilege means responsibility. When I was preparing to preach, as I was preparing a message, I had this a different kind of aphorism going through my mind on a regular basis, and that was the old saying, the message of the gospel should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And I knew that on any given Sunday in the pews, there were people who were really afflicted. Some people who came, living with a serious health concern, living with financial worries, maybe caring for an aging parent or an elderly spouse, grieving a significant loss in their life. And I wanted to be sure as a pastor that something I said might bring some comfort. And at the same time, I was aware that many in the congregation were comfortable. And I was too, with more than a roof over our heads, with plenty of food on our tables, by the world standards, living in relative ease, privilege. And I felt a responsibility to name the hard truth, to interrupt the status quo a little bit, to push people into their discomfort zone. So I think about this aphorism in light of what you shared tonight, Meg, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And it seems to me that often spiritual leaders actually end up trying to comfort the comfortable. Maybe we're afraid of upsetting people. We want contented congregations. We want people to show up. We struggle to know how to speak the hard truth in a time of deep division and political partisanship. And we worry that if we afflict too much, that people will find something else to do with their time. But I remember also that Bill McKibben often says, the planet is in its discomfort zone, and we should be too. So what I appreciate about your words tonight and about your writing too, Margaret, I'm thinking especially about the book, Who Do We Choose to Be, which is the one I've read most recently, is, and you've done it tonight too, that you don't hesitate to go straight for the truth. And in many ways, it's a hard truth. You don't sidestep the reality that this is a chaotic time between the climate crisis and the decline of democracy, growing economic disparity, violence in so many places, the collapse of Western civilization. I mean, this is discomfort zone. So thank you for being a truth teller. Reverend Dr. William Barber, the second or the third of the Poor People's Campaign, says, the role of the church is to engage in the dangerous ministry of telling the truth. So I want to talk about that. You're a truth teller. You don't shy away from afflicting the comfortable. You're encouraging us tonight to do that as well. But I find that you do it in a way that's really empowering, that invites us to be our best selves, that challenges us to face reality head on and to claim the leadership that we have, and to have realistic, right-sized understanding of our own spheres of influence and our own ability to affect change. So I heard you say tonight, ask the question, what's needed here? And then ask the question, am I the one who can offer that? I think these are two really great questions for faith communities and spiritual leaders to be asking. What's needed here? Are we the ones who can offer that? And so I'm just thinking about what it means to be leaders of this time, to focus our energy on what's possible, and then to willingly step forward to serve the human spirit. And it seems to me that faith communities have a ways to go. We're distracted by comforting the comfortable. And this is not a moment when we can do that. We have received radical theological truths, and we follow in the footsteps of radical leaders, and we find ourselves so often, focusing on the trivial, what color the carpet should be, or something like that. You know, we sanitize these truths that we've received and we wrap them up in starched linen. So anyway, there's a lot there. And so now here comes my question. Is there something specific that you want to say tonight to spiritual leaders, clergy, chaplains, spiritual directors, dedicated lay people who lead in their spiritual communities? There's lots of people like that in this room tonight. And I'm not thinking about the ivory towers, you know, the judicatory leaders who oversee giant international religious bodies. I'm thinking about the average leader in the average small town or urban neighborhood, the people who are really in the trenches. And in light of all the challenges we face tonight, what would you want spiritual leaders to hear about their role in this moment?
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce you to Gabrielle Gelderman, a hospital and movement chaplain who serves as one of our BTS Center facilitators for conversation circles focused on chaplaincy and the environment. Prior to her chaplaincy training, Gabrielle co-founded and served as an organizer with Climate Justice Edmonton, a grassroots volunteer-led organization working for environmental, economic, and racial justice in Canada. She offers one-on-one spiritual direction and regular drop-in grief circles on the topic of climate and political grief. We're so grateful to have Gabrielle in our orbit as a facilitator and right now as a participant in the Who Do We Choose to Be book study we're offering. Gabrielle.
Thank you, Nicole. And yeah, thank you so much, Meg, for your words and your writing. I, you know, as an organizer, as a younger person doing climate work, pieces really resonated deeply, like your framing of the importance of turning to face reality and seeing it clearly, and the work that that takes and the courage that that takes to really see what's in front of us. And then your piece about service, your emphasis on service feels so resonant and so important for people, including people in my generation, to take to heart deeply. Yeah, I think some of my my challenge with your work is around, similar to what Susie touched on, around structural change. And I know, I'm sure this has been a big criticism that you've encountered in multiple ways throughout your work and your writing. But it really, yeah, as an organizer, as someone committed to justice work and transformational work, who similarly sees a dark future ahead and a lot of decline ahead, it still seems to me essential to be involved in work on a systemic level, despite the enormity of those problems. And I guess, yeah, my curiosity lies around whether you see what your response is to those advocating for systemic change, whether you see those islands of sanity as pockets of people who are interconnected in any way. For me in my work, and the spirituality of my work as an organizer and someone fighting for justice, is that I experience a feeling of solidarity with other people around the world doing similar work. And as a socialist, I feel connected on this kind of deep level to people engaged in liberation work around the world. And that's what feeds me and provides me this sense of kind of spiritual and emotional motivation. And I wonder, I just, to me, an island of sanity feels really isolating. And I wonder if the people you've worked with, the warriors for the human spirit, what kind of community there is that extends beyond the island of sanity. So what kind of community they experience, and whether or not there's any political action, economic action that is that you advocate for on a more systemic level.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you so much to each of our conversationalists. We'll be able to engage with them in just a moment, along with Ben and Meg, bringing everyone together. As we did earlier, we're going to open the chat again for appreciations and for wonderings, anything you want to contribute to that space. Theo, would you lead us in song one more time as we metabolize what we're hearing?
Absolutely. You can think of, you can take this just as a breathing meditation if you want. Sarah Dan Jones wrote, this is just the chorus of a longer song that Sarah Dan Jones wrote in response to 9/11. But the words are very simple. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. And if you want, you can just breathe in and breathe out. Sing, breathe, do what you need. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And another simple one, based on one line from a Wendell Berry poem, just the simple idea that what we need is here. And of course for me, this is never saying you have everything you need. It's saying it's here, so don't give up on the search for it. Know that what you need is here. Find it and put it to use. Here's how that goes. And you can make up any harmony you want, because it's just a downward scale. What we need is here. 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 What we need is here.
Thank you, Theo.
You're welcome.
Ben.
Thank you, Thew, for bringing us back into the spot of conversation, and a word of just appreciation for Gabrielle, for Susie, for Alan, for sharing with us so thoughtfully and continuing to enrich our discussion. So, Meg, I'd like to turn back to you for a second. I've heard some really interesting questions about what does it mean to be with the loss of with the loss and suffering, and not deny the fact that we are humans who have emotions that need to be processed. I've heard questions about what does interconnection look like across islands of sanity? What is the role of spiritual leaders? And I wonder if there might be one or two things you might be able to offer us in the next couple minutes to launch us into our time of a group conversation together.
Certainly. And thank the three of you, Susie, Gabrielle, and Alan. I really was tantalized by some of your reactions. So I want to start by saying that the greatest difficulty is to see clearly what's going on with the planet, with our society, with people, and recognize that we are powerless, except how we are together and the work we do together locally. There's such a danger of refusing to accept the reality. Yes, the refugio will be destroyed. I know that from the get-go, but it's a meaningful work. It's a meaningful life. I see the numbers that you raised, Susie, among people, 80% burnt out. How do we keep them going? How do we keep them alive in some cases? And certainly this is true of our teens as well. The great rise in mental illness and despair and suicide in many different age groups is something I'm tracking carefully. How do we deal with that? That's the reality of this time. We're not getting out of this. We're not getting out of planetary ecological collapse. The planet has its own processes. We're living through them now. They are not reversible. You don't reverse anything in an emergent system. Once it's in place, it just acts out its own laws. It's very lawful behavior that we're experiencing now. We just thought we could get away with being unlawful. I've written a lot about this, so I won't go into detail now, but to say that with Michael Dowd's great definition of hopium, one of the chief criterion, Michael Dowd just left us suddenly 2 or 3 weeks ago. It was a terrible, terrible loss for us, but I refer everyone to his website, Post-Doom, No Gloom. It's how to be once we accept the reality of planetary collapse. And my work is on societal collapse. So hopium is believing that we can deny the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology. I have a good conversation with Michael Dowd on my website, and I'm sure Kelly will post that for you. What I really want to talk about is to you, Gabrielle. I am not suggesting that we do nothing. I'm not, and I'm very serious about, yes, we have to grieve. But what's happening in this culture is it stops with me. Like, I'm in pain, I'm grieving. I want to know what you're going to do once you process your grief. So I can sound a little harsh on that, but genuinely I feel, let's get serious, work through these emotions. I have to work through rage on every other day, feelings of powerless often, feelings of grief for what's being lost, but I'm accepting those. So I just want people to not get lost in this narcissistic, self-focused society of just wanting to feel more comfortable with my grief, or just wanting to feel better so I'm not overwhelmed with sorrow and sadness. I work and write about this quite a lot. But the importance of all of this as an island of sanity, as a healthy community, is so we can do good work. These are not islands that are disconnected, but they have to be an island within their the current situation. It can be a team within an organization. It can be a healthy community, although those are very rare these days. It can be a network of activists who realize, no, we have to stay together and be committed to one another in a whole new way. We can't just check in and out with each other. Every warrior for the human spirit is focused on contributing. They work in justice, they work in equity, they work in leadership, they work in immigration, they work in universities or with public school teachers. So we're activists, but we're grounded in a very different understanding of, I need to take care of my reactivity. I need to learn how to deal with my emotions more quickly so they don't keep me from contributing. And yes, one of my books, Walk Out, Walk On, is about what we call translocal work. So in that book, we describe the work we did in connecting people from very different countries, all younger leaders, in exchanging information, exchanging ideas, and being in relationship to support one another. You cannot do this or survive alone. So the need is for strong community, but not to make us feel better. It's strong community so we can stay. The basic foundation is that warriors commit to staying and doing the best they can with what they have. But our relationships are at a whole different level of commitment, a whole different level of commitment. It's not casual at all because we know we can't do this alone. So I just want to end with Václav Havel's quote, on another quote about his on hope, which he said, hope is not the conviction that something will turn out well, but the certainty that something is worth doing no matter how it turns out. So this is a different worldview. It's a different life plan. It's unlike anything we were prepared for or trained for, but now it is about dealing with reality and finding meaning in the moment, in our relationships, and in those healthy relationships, still being able to work for justice, equity, delivering food to people, or just raising awareness among other people of how much suffering is going on. So that's my general answer.
Thank you, Meg.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And I just want to name how much I'm appreciating the richness of this conversation. I appreciate, Meg, you sharing what you did in a way that I think woke us all up and got us to engage. And conversationalists, I really appreciate the way you were able to share your appreciations and the places where you had questions and places where you might have felt some significant difference with what Meg was sharing. And then, Meg, what I appreciate you doing in that response is taking some of these things that perhaps we would posit as binaries, living as we do in such a dichotomous culture, and beginning for us to think about the ways that how are, islands, refugia, and interconnection actually not opposites, but part of the same holism? How are local and systemic part of the same thing? How can grief actually be something be a necessary precursor for engaged action? And that can be a way to think about why we enter into our grieving processes well and with great intention. What is how are self-sacrifice and sustaining our spirits for the hard work for the long term actually, again, part of the same thing? And I'm wondering, and I'd like to turn this back to our conversationalists, if any of you want to speak to one of those binaries or apparent binaries and maybe the whole that you see present within them. So local and systemic, grief into action, self-sacrifice, and sustenance for the long term.
I'm happy to take a first take at this. So it turns out, Meg, we agree completely. So that's wonderful. That more differentiated way you just named it makes a lot of sense to me, and is very much my own sort of place from which I come to processing whatever we face and how we then turn that into positive action. I guess there's two comments that I want to make. When you speak of eldership and the way of leadership, the way you define it, it always reminds me of how others have described to me what it means to be an elder. Someone that is no longer focused just on their what is mine, what's my need, my own ego needs or whatever. It's oriented toward the common good, whether that is social or ecological or the combination of both, but really thinking about how to sustain our socio-ecological community for a better tomorrow. So I just want to name it as, it has nothing to do with age, right? It is about a kind of maturity in how we enact ourselves on this planet. And the other comment that I wanted to make had to do with this quote from Václav Havel that you just mentioned about the certainty about that it's good to do regardless of outcome. I think that's right, and it's probably not even enough anymore for our times, because I'm thinking of Jonathan Lear's book, Radical Hope, in which both the outcomes and the means become uncertain. So it's a commitment to the future. It's a commitment to emergence. It's a commitment to, if you will, system dynamics. But it is, it's, I don't know, there is something about leadership with a radical embrace of uncertainty that's even beyond, I'm certain this is the right way to go.
For sure.
Thank you for that, Susie. Alan.
Yeah, I want to bring it back in spiritual leaders. Again, I know we have a lot of congregational clergy in this room, and I think about the incredible power that congregational clergy have, much of it sort of unrealized, to kind of nurture this kind of sense that we're talking about tonight. And just to name it, Christianity is the tradition that I know best, and there are different Christianities. There are some that are really focused on the individual, personal salvation, sort of almost a kind of toxic individualism, personal liberty. But the ones that I love best and that I think are most needed in this moment are the ones that are really focused on the common good. And I think about Pope Francis, the way that he talked about the common good in Laudato Si, which was really kind of radical, to include in that sense of the common good, not just human beings, but all living species, and even more radical, the future generations as part of the common good. So sort of widening that sense of common good. But back to congregational clergy for a second, there are very few sectors where constituents gather in the same room week after week to reflect on our deepest values, to read from sacred texts, to pray, to sing together, to engage in communal spiritual practice. And when faith leaders, and I don't just mean clergy, but lay leaders as well, miss the opportunity that is present just by gathering in that way to nurture a deeper sense of common good, I think we've really missed the mark. But there's such great potential in that vehicle for manifesting the kind of change that we need to see.
Thank you, Alan. Gabrielle, I wonder if there's anything you might want to say about any of these binaries moving to a holism. Yeah, is there one here that you might want to speak to?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. The one around local and systemic still feels so important to me. And I think it brings me to this, I guess, this issue that I take sometimes with people talking about justice, leadership in spiritual settings, but not clarifying or positioning themselves in a political tradition. And perhaps I'm wrong. I've only read one of your books, Meg, and you do mention some of the systems of oppression, militarism, and other forms. But yeah, I think for me, the local and systemic are so deeply interwoven. that even our work in our islands of sanity or in our immediate communities is relates to these like bigger political and economic systems that are occurring and influencing us
Yes.
deeply. And just to finish, like sometimes I'm like, there's these huge long traditions of justice and liberation on the left, coming out of various people opposing imperialism, colonialism, capitalism, and they have a whole system of political thought and theory that relates to justice. And so I don't see people sometimes in spaces like this engaging with that large body of thought. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm curious. Yeah, if you have thoughts on that.
Well, certainly Grace Lee Boggs, which I hope you're familiar with her.
Mm-hmm.
What she did was create a strong theory of revolution, but she put the R in parentheses, so it was nonviolent. And I would just go back to some of her books, and I worked closely with her and the Boggs Center before Grace passed on at the age of 100. But I don't think we need a theory right now. What I feel, and it's good you're raising this, because my understanding of Islands of Sanity is it creates the level of community we need. So for these professionals, the climate scientists, the technicians that you're in touch with, Susie, it creates a level of community so they can keep doing their work. So they're not alone. So they can find places of comfort, humor, hospitality, solidarity. I mean, we are really suffering from a lack of community with a shared view. We see a lot of crazy communities out there that have their own bizarre and very destructive views. We need the view, and this is one of the important things of creating warriors for the human spirit. Our view is that no matter what, we are committed to staying, and we know how hard that is. We are committing to serving whatever needs we can, and we're committed to being, this is the important part now, embodying the best human qualities so that others can remember what it feels like to be in the presence of compassion, discernment, generosity, creativity. So we have the responsibility of embodying those qualities, and that takes a lot of work and a lot of practice these days. But we're also together. We're also together. And the reason I call them islands is because they are located in these highly toxic seas in many different places. So the first work, and this is so hard, some of you have experienced trying to establish a community, even within a congregation, Ellen, and that's damn hard work, right? And so for me, I've done a lot of work in building healthy communities. People need to realize that if we're not together and if we're not committed to each other, we will not survive out there in this increasingly toxic sea or environment. And then we keep getting hit. I mean, look how we just got hit with the Israel-Hamas conflict, which is going to blow up in our faces in another week. Clearly, it seems nothing can stop that. So we are together in ways that really are necessary so we can still do our work, but we let go of outcomes, because that's that level of disappointment. We work our butts off, we really work extremely hard. That's a self-sacrifice part of what I'm describing. But we give up results. We give up hope for results. And this is in many great spiritual traditions, certainly. And then we just do the very best we can. You know, I want to go out in flames, having given it my all. So And I'm going to get to your deeper question, Alan, by reading a poem that I wrote that had the same phraseology, "I am here," that we just heard in his song. So that felt very propitious as well. I also do want to say, though, I've done a lot of work in congregations over the years, and now have several UUA ministers who have been in warrior training with me. You can't assume that because we read a sacred text and that we have shared values, because I'm not finding that to be true, especially when asking people to step up and stop focusing so much on the internal dynamics of our congregation, right? Let's get serious about how we're serving our community. And then some members of the congregation don't like that at all because they're there for their own spiritual nourishment. So don't assume that, but work toward that. Absolutely. That's a condition. Yeah.
Thank you, Meg. I want to turn back to our conversationalists just really quickly and ask you, so there's this quote that you offered, Meg, and that then Susie, you complicated a little bit about like what will be worth doing regardless of the outcome. And I wonder if each of you might share in turn in like 2 sentences, what for you right now is worth doing regardless of the outcome. And then Meg, we'll come back to you for a poem in our closing. Alan, would you start us? What is worth doing right now for you, regardless of the outcome?
I want to say devoting my best energy to equipping, nurturing, providing formation opportunities for spiritual leaders of all kinds. Spiritual leaders are not going to save the planet, but we have important work to do in this moment to nurture the very qualities of the warriors of the human spirit that Meg has talked about tonight. And so just devoting my time, energy, creativity, imagination to that work in the lives of spiritual leaders is worth doing regardless of the outcome.
Thank you, Alan. Gabrielle.
I have to say at this moment, what's worth doing, what feels worth doing, regardless of the outcome, is expressing solidarity and grief with people in Palestine living under years of occupation and now a genocide, and expressing solidarity and support for liberation from those oppressive forces.
Thank you. Susie.
Thanks, Gabrielle, for that. That really resonates. You know, it's an interesting question you're asking me because it's very much the question I'm holding during my sabbatical. And I don't want to prematurely answer that for in some ways, but one of the things I'm doing very much during this journey is to ask questions, to hold questions, and to pay exquisite attention to all the different ways in which I'm given answers all the time. So it's really showing up, paying attention, and then in many ways letting go of, you know, wherever that my preconceived outcomes or wherever that should go. But that's my practice right now. And I think it's probably a really helpful one for many times when we feel so certain of what all should be done.
Thank you, Susie. Meg, I know you have a poem to offer us by way of a blessing and invitation.
Well, and I'll just read it, but I want to give a little bit of the history of this poem. I wrote it. It's about Abraham. That's the title of the poem. When a friend named his son Isaac. And then after writing it, I was with Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Barbara Holmes. And I had known Archbishop Tutu because I worked a lot in South Africa, but I was able to offer them this poem as well. And I want to offer it really as a challenge. And it was so beautiful that Tu's song was, "I am here." That's the refrain of the learning from Abraham. wrote this in 1998. Wow. Okay. As he had done before, Abram walked into the night with God. Many times God had talked with him, and many times Abram had built him an altar. He knew this God, God who led him from his father's house to lands of promise, God who vowed to be his shield and exceeding great reward, God who so wanted Abram to love him that he would save Sodom if he could. As he had done before, Abram walked into the night with God. Many times God had talked with him, and many times Abram had built him an altar. The sky was clear, the stars shone. Can you count the stars, Abram? God asked. No, Lord, for they are everywhere and without number. And then God, who loved Abram, promised him again, promised him the fathering of a nation without number. Abram knew this God. In his 99th year, Abram became Abraham. Exalted father became father of many nations. God asked him to be perfect, meaning that we are already the image of God, and covenanted with him again. Sarah, who was old, was to bear a son. Sarah, who was listening behind the curtain, laughed. Her laughter insulted God. Do you think, God asked Abraham, that anything is too hard for me? Sarah denied she had laughed, but when the babe was born, Sarah laughed and laughed. All that hear me will laugh with me, she said. They named the child Isaac, which means to laugh and to rejoice. He, first of a new nation, child of joy and mirth. As he had done before, Abraham walked into the night with God and with Isaac. Many times God had talked with them, and many times they had built him an altar. They knew this God. Innocent Isaac, carrying wood for his own pyre, asked about the lamb. God provides, said Abraham, and Isaac, who loved his father, who loved God, knew this was true. We do not know how Abraham bound his child to the pyre. We do not know who raised the knife. We know one thing. 3 times that day, Abraham was called, and 3 times that day he answered, "Here I am." This is not Peter denying God 3 times, Peter collapsing before the crowing cock. This is Abraham knowing God, walking into the night. Then Abraham raises his knife to slay Isaac, and an angel calls to him, "Abraham, Abraham," and he answers, "Here I am." And the angel finds him, and we shall all be saved. Many years later, Paul writes to the Hebrews about Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The faithful, says Paul, embrace as real what has only been promised. They live in a future not of their time, but true. But Abraham's faith was not that reasonable. Abraham's faith was that he could bless the senselessness of God, to hold him to no promise, to love him past his madness, because Abraham knew, he knew beyond all reason, God.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to Susie and Alan and Gabrielle. I invite you to join me in expressing your gratitude through Zoom reactions or a big wave, whatever you would like to do. And if some of you want to put on gallery view so you can see everyone waving, we're so grateful for this meaningful conversation this evening, something that's got us challenged and thinking. And many, many thanks to each and every one of you who took part in this with us. We're so grateful to be on this journey with you. And I'd like to invite you to continue to spend time with the BTS Center. First, I want to let you know that Ben and I co-host the BTS Center's podcast called Climate Changed. And this season, we are exploring collective honesty and complicated hope. Episode 2 of season 2 comes out next Tuesday and includes an extended conversation with Susie Mosier, who is with us tonight. Episode 5, which comes out in January, features Margaret Wheatley. So if you enjoyed tonight's conversation, we know you'll enjoy Climate Changed, which you can access anywhere you listen to podcasts and at the website in the chat. Second, if you would like to join us in experimenting with engaging grief as a precursor to meaningful action, we would love to have you with us for Lament with Earth, a seasonal worship-filled online gathering created by the BTS Center and the incredible musicians and liturgists at the Many. Our next gathering is on the evening of November 1st and will be co-hosted by the Center for Spirituality in Nature. You can learn more and register at the link in the chat. And finally, we are partnering with the Chaplaincy Innovation Lab on a series of midday conversations, and our next event is coming up on November 15th with Talitha Amadeo Aho and J.D. Meckelkey on spiritual wayfinding with a focus on caring for young people in these times. Again, learn more and register for the link in the chat. As we close, I want to offer deep gratitude for Thew Elliott for providing our soundtrack this evening, for helping us to breathe and to sing. Thew, could you close us with a song?
Absolutely. It's probably familiar to many of you, so I'm just going to jump right in. My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the clear though far off hymn that hails a new creation. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is all in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing? Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear that music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging, since love is all in heaven and earth. How can I keep from singing?
Blessings, friends. If you feel moved to unmute and say goodbye, we welcome that cacophony. Thank you for being with us. Good night. Blessings. Thank you.